We live in a world where we're always connected, right? Even in what we think are the most remote places on Earth, you can probably still get a satellite signal. But what does it mean to be truly, completely offline? We're about to find out, because there's a place where being disconnected isn't just for a weekend detox, it's a way of life.
Just think about that for a second. Over a year, no emails pinging, no social media feeds to scroll, no breaking news alerts, nothing. Just you, a couple of other people, and the endless blue of the ocean. And this isn't some story from 100 years ago. This is happening right now on a tiny little spot in the ocean called Helen Reef.
So that's the big question, isn't it? In this age where we're all about connectivity, what would make someone voluntarily just cut themselves off? Well, to get to the bottom of it, we're going to follow a family who went on a wild journey to meet them. So our guides for this whole thing are this family of sailors. Now you might think, oh, they live on a boat, they must be pretty isolated too. And on the surface, yeah, they're out there on the ocean. But their reality could not be more different from the rangers they're about to meet.
And this is where it gets really interesting. Check out this contrast. The sailing family has high-speed satellite internet. They are literally using ChatGPT in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. The rangers, they have absolutely zero internet. Their news comes on a supply boat every few months. This sets up such a fascinating clash between two completely different ways of living in the 21st century.
So, how do you even get to a place like Helen Reef? Well, let me tell you, it is not easy. The journey itself is this grueling 4-day ordeal at sea. It's a serious test of endurance that, frankly, keeps most people away.
But for this particular family, an already really hard trip was about to get a whole lot harder. They were setting out across the open ocean on their sailboat, facing this almost unbelievable problem.
Yeah, you heard that right. A sailboat with no sails. So they had to rely completely on their engine, which, as you can imagine, created this whole cascade of nerve-wracking problems that turned the trip into a really high-stakes gamble. See, without sails, fuel is everything. It's your lifeline. They had to motor super slowly, sometimes just creeping along at 3 knots to make sure they didn't run out. Now imagine doing that at night, in the pitch black, knowing there are giant, freshly cut logs floating around from nearby deforestation. Hitting one of those could have been a total disaster. On top of that, they were exhausted, running round-the-clock watches. It was a seriously risky trip.
But after 4 incredibly long, stressful days, they made it. They arrived at Helen Reef. And after all that solitude and tension, they finally came face to face with the men they've traveled all this way to meet.
So who exactly are these guys? Well, the Helen Reef Rangers are basically the guardians of one of the planet's last healthy marine ecosystems. They spend their days out on patrol, literally defending the reef from poachers and these huge industrial fishing fleets that are always lurking just outside the protected zone.
And this quote, man, it just perfectly captures the scale of their challenge. It's a total David and Goliath story. You have just a handful of rangers on a tiny little sandbar trying to hold the line against these massive, well-equipped industrial operations. It's an incredible mission.
Okay, so now that we know why they're there, let's get into the how. What does a life completely removed from the digital world, what does that actually look and feel like today? The sailors asked them a pretty simple question, but the answer is, well, it's something most of us can barely even imagine. How long had it been since they'd been online? Not days, not weeks, not even months.
1.5 years. One of the rangers had done a previous tour of duty on the reef that lasted 18 straight months, with zero internet. Zero. Just let that sink in for a minute. And what he said about it is just, wow, it really hits you. They don't resent technology. They actually value it so much. For them, when a visiting boat offers them a few minutes of internet, it's not a distraction. They call it a blessing. It's this rare, incredibly precious link to the world they've left behind.
But, this kind of isolation, it comes with a price. They told the family that recruiting new rangers is a huge struggle. The younger generation is just so used to having technology at their fingertips that new guys often show up and want to leave after just 1 week. And then there are the practical things, like the time they completely ran out of rice and had to rely on a passing ship to help them out.
So you can imagine seeing this life up close. This life of real purpose and simplicity, and this deep, deep connection to nature. It had a huge and honestly a pretty unexpected effect on the visiting sailing family. Just being there, on that little island,
Spending time with the rangers and watching their own kids just thriving in that environment, it stirred something deep inside them. It actually reawakened a dream they'd had for a long, long time. It turns out the rangers' off-grid life was a mirror image of a dream the family had for themselves. A life on land with a garden, pets, a sense of community, all the things you can't really have when you live on a boat. The very isolation they came to study showed them a future they now wanted for themselves.
And this wasn't just some passing thought, you know? The whole experience was so transformative that it pushed them to consider making a monumental, life-changing decision, something that would completely change who they are as world-traveling sailors.
And it all led to this. The journey to meet the most isolated men on Earth made them question their own life so deeply that they are now seriously thinking about ending their journey. The pull of a simpler, more grounded life turned out to be more powerful than the pull of the open ocean.
And that leaves us with a pretty big question to think about, doesn't it? In a world that's always screaming for our attention, maybe this story shows us that true disconnection isn't about what we lose, but about what we might find. Maybe a different kind of purpose, a deeper connection to the world right in front of us, and maybe even a brand new direction for our own lives.